people share it whenever you want. Yeah, because we're short. We're short of mic. Oops.
So,
well, welcome everyone to Crypto Mondays at our beautiful new location for the first time here at Nixon Peabody. And thank you very much to Lior, who's back there, who's our host. He's going to tell you a little bit about what they do in a minute. But how many people here is their first time at a Crypto Mondays? Awesome. Great. So much fun to see new people. And our mission here is to build community and to help people of all different walks of life and interest levels and technical experience levels and business experience levels. Meet people, hear about what interesting things are going on in blockchain, and basically build your knowledge and to build a community. So we're really focused on that. We're not a dev-centric thing. We're more business-centric, but the idea is for all of you to connect and come up with ideas and interesting things. We do these once a month. Our next one is going to be a month from now, the 25th. It's going to be about investing. That's going to be kind of fun. We're actually going to have a trader up front showing how he trades different cryptos. So that's going to be kind of cool. And we're also going to have a couple of professional investors talking about how they look at projects. So without further ado, I want to introduce you all to our moderator tonight, Yulia, and she will take it from here.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you all for coming. Helping us out with pizzas and drinks. This is a courtesy of our venue sponsor, Nixon Peabody. First time we have an event here. Thank you guys so much for having us. I'd love to have Lior in front of the stage to give a quick intro.
Thank you.
To summarize what you guys are working on. I think it's super exciting. You have offices across the United States.
Hi, everybody. Thank you all for coming. My name is Lior Zuri. I'm a corporate and securities lawyer, and we are delighted to host Crypto Mondays here. A word about Nixon Peabody. We're a national firm, and we do lots of cool things, and particularly strong in corporate. And we are, we just moved into this beautiful space, and we want to share it with the community. And we're looking to grow our emerging companies practice. We have a very strong corporate practice, and I've worked with some crypto clients, Civic and Proppy, and we're looking to expand that. So thank you all for coming, and back to you, Yulia. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. So we have more partners that would love to give the shout out to. BFast has been a partner of ours for a really long time, since the beginning. Marina, please come to stage. You better to introduce yourself.
Marina.
hello. Hi, everyone. My name is Marina. I'm the CEO of BFast Media. We are a TV channel and media production house here based in San Francisco. And we help Crypto Mondays to build bigger community via streaming and online. So instead of like 60, 80 people here, we can reach 1,000 people. So you guys can really share your knowledge and ideas to people located in other cities and countries. So yeah, if you're interested, go to bfast.tv and find out more. Thank you so much.
Marina is awesome. Even when she cannot come to Crypto Mondays event, she watches it out of Hong Kong or wherever in the world you are. It's very impressive. So that's what live streaming does. When you travel, you cannot come, but you would like to hear from one of the speakers, please sign up. Again, we are on Eventbrite. That's where we distribute our tickets, but Meetup is also another way to learn about our upcoming events, what's coming up, what topics. We always recruiting new speakers, want to hear more about new companies, so please come up to me or one of the organizers after the event. So that's going to be Andy, Mark, or Bill. I don't see Bill anymore. Cool. And Eris as well. What else did I forget? Cool. So tonight we're going to talk about blockchain and enterprise. We have a very diverse panel. the author of the book, you know, the VP of development and head of partnerships. You guys kind of have similar roles. Can you please introduce yourselves and talk a little bit about what you do at your companies?
Hi, I'm Alison McCauley, and as you mentioned, I just published a book called Unblocked, and it's to help explain the blockchain opportunity to executives that are new to the space. And I wrote that after falling down the blockchain rabbit hole, pulled in by clients. So I'm also the CEO of Unblocked Future, which is a firm that, if you think about it as the collision of a B2B strategy firm and customer-centric communicators. So we help companies that are really at the forefront of emerging tech to explain to their market, to their partner ecosystems, and to their employees what they do. So.
My name is Ali Nazem. I'm vice president at Showcard. I wear a lot of different hats there, so I basically do a little bit of everything except write code. Showcard is a full end-to-end digital identity platform that's built on top of the mobile device, that's built on top of the blockchain. It's an app that a user can download to store and share their identity with various entities to do transactions, access services, log into a website without username and password. We do this for both cyber access as well as physical access control into a building, to IoT devices. The two key principles of the company is around security and privacy. So from a security standpoint, we don't house a central database that could be hacked or breached. We utilize the blockchain for validation purposes, realizing if you put something in a big database, it makes it a target for hackers, a treasure trove of data. So only signature hashes of data that gets put on there for validation purposes. And then from a privacy standpoint, the personal information remains on the device. It's encrypted, protected by the private key. So the user's in control of their data and who they want to share it with.
Interesting. So we should ask him about Facebook trying to be a competitor now. I'm Danny Brown-Wolf. I'm head of partnerships and strategy at Forbes. Forbes is a public blockchain that we built from the ground up, but that is part of the Ethereum stack. So we actually built interoperability with Ethereum, so dApps can tokenize on Ethereum, but have all the production done on a production-grade blockchain, which is Forbes. And today is specifically interesting to us because we're constantly working on the requirement-driven of the industry and of enterprise as well. So we're always looking to have the requirement-driven design and architecture of Forbes also accommodate the enterprise and corporate world.
Awesome, thank you guys. So let's continue with the soft intro into the enterprise here, but heavier topics. Can you tell us more about how you started? Why did you decide to get into the blockchain space? I'm curious to hear from Alison. You took an unusual path.
Yeah, so my background's very unusual for many people that are immersed in the space right now. I'm a social scientist, so I've been working for 20 years at the intersection of emerging tech and human behavior, trying to understand adoption and how you help to accelerate adoption. And as I mentioned, I was pulled in by clients who were enthusiastic about the space, and I came in a skeptic, a pretty strong skeptic. And so as I went through that cycle myself, and obviously like many of us here saw the many layers at which this could impact our world, I was pulled in hook, line, and sinker. And I'm a relatively intense person, so that then took me to this project to spend a year writing a book, and I just launched it last month. It did really well. So that's how I got pulled in. And I had a moment where after I finally understood the layers, all the different layers, I realized that unlike any other technology, this is one that's going to keep me captivated and interested for at least a decade, which that was a huge moment for me. I usually flip from one to another.
Well, I got into it kind of by accident. I had spent 20 years in the media and advertising ecosystem and was kind of getting bored of that and looking for something interesting and different. Our CEO, I worked for him, ran sales at another company, and he was coming up with this concept. He's like, yeah, you know, it's like around digital identity, and he was showing me some of the use cases and, you know, how we can regain control of our identities without having it all dispersed all over the place. So I needed a change. He was starting it, so I went, all right, let's go. We've had a good exit before, so I was counting on something like that happening again. And that was about 4 years ago. And this was early days, I would say. It's like before people really knew what blockchain was. It was, you know, the underbelly of the internet. It was the crypto, you know, dark web and the currency, things like that. And so in many ways, when I was in my media and advertising ecosystem, the invention of the internet, and it feels like blockchain was a lot like the early days of the internet, where, well, we need to go check this out. There's a lot of hope there. There's a lot of cool things we can do, but we don't know what it is, but we're going to go figure it out. There are scale issues. There's, you know, distribution issues, things like that. So over, you know, the course of the last 4 years, I've learned a lot, but it was basically by accident getting into it. But now I couldn't be happier having started kind of on the ground floor of this really, you know, exciting new ecosystem, new market.
Cool. So I also have an unusual path. I started out from the policy world, foreign policy and international law. I worked in the United Nations, in the Israeli parliament, and in think tanks. And a few years ago, I decided that I want to do something that's more social impact and innovation, because in policy at the UN, et cetera, you work really hard, but nothing changes. So I'm like, okay, maybe there's somewhere that I can have better impact. And I started reading about innovation in social impact space, and there was the World Food Program pilot about humanitarian aid delivery using blockchain technology. And this is something that I knew from the United Nations was a big problem, because there's no accountability for the humanitarian aid. And they did a really interesting pilot in a Syrian refugee camp in Jordan. And I'm like, what is this magical blockchain technology that is allowing, you know, things that we've been talking about in terms of efficiency and accountability for so many years, but there was nothing to build it on, those ideas. And then I just went down the rabbit hole until I got to Orbs, which is hardcore infrastructure. So here I am building the foundations that we can build these applications on.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. So I read somewhere, well, Elon Musk says it. You have to ask the question why twice. So I'm going to ask it again to you guys. Why is Orbs built on blockchain? Why Showcard built on blockchain? Not as applicable to you, Alison, but you know, I'm curious about why there's so many innovative industries, and like for identity case, like it doesn't have to, the security doesn't have to be built on blockchain, right? And I'm just curious to hear more on why. Why does it have to be this
We're
way?
building a blockchain and not on blockchain. So I don't know how to answer that, except for to say maybe how we're building it is maybe the answer. That necessity is really the birth of all innovation. And the way we're building Orbs as a public blockchain, as opposed to a lot of the spaceships that are being built out there, we call them professor coins, that this is the other side of the spectrum of like total decentralization, and let's build this foundation for this utopian dream. We're actually very much requirement driven. So Orbs was started by our founders because we had a fund and an advisory. And the clients that we had came to us and say, well, we don't have, or we told them, we're sorry, there is no infrastructure right now that's available to accommodate for your 20 million users and onboard them on any blockchain. There's just the scale, the fees, the business models, it just doesn't exist. So we're like, okay, so we're going to build it for them. That's how we started, and I guess that's my answer. It's all about driving necessity.
So when we started, we didn't say we want to be a blockchain company, and that's how do we utilize a blockchain. We consider ourselves a identity company that happens to use the blockchain for the advantages it brings, like data integrity, having disparate entities be able to store and share data without a central database, putting the user in control of their identity and their data. So we use the blockchain for the benefits it can bring, not necessarily just because that's where we want to be.
I think what you were talking about, that's part of the crux of the enterprise challenge is how do you leverage what's in this technology, but still make it work for an enterprise? And I think there's a lot of tension and struggles that are happening today as that comes, we figure out the right approach for that.
Do you surface any of those insights in your book? Like, why would any of us buy Unblocked? Why would I be interested? Or is it targeted to people that are more novice or more intellectual, more advanced level of knowledge?
I wrote the book to explain to the novice why, the newbie, what is happening in this space. And what I've noticed is that a lot of people, when trying to explain blockchain, because it is a raw material that could do so much, do what I call blockchain vomit. They vomit up everything at once and overwhelm people. And I saw a lot of books and, frankly, just a lot of the discourse in all the events that we go to where it's just all coming out at once. So what I wanted to do was come up with an aerial view that anyone could understand without any background. What I found that was interesting is that a lot of people in the community are enjoying the book because it helps to give a story arc to what people know in their gut, right? So there's certain principles that are in the space. Self-sovereign data and what that means for us. What is peer-to-peer without a middleman? What does that mean for our future? Well, how will that change our consumers over time, our customers over time, and what's the impact? So I feel like there's not enough discussion in the space about what are the social macro implications of what's in this technology, the seeds of change that are embedded in this technology. So that's what comes to light in the book, and it simplifies it and talks about these factors that will drive change. So I think that could be useful to many, but it was targeted for somebody who's new.
Awesome. So how many of you are interested in buying the book? I want to.
Thanks.
I think there's not enough knowledge, honestly. Like, this topic is quite complex, and it's been moving at the speed of light. The technology, not enough infrastructure. There's many other challenges in blockchain in general. I think user adoption is another one. Can you guys talk a little bit more about the acquisition process for your company? For those who are building the blockchain companies. I work in marketing for Google, and I work with enterprise clients actually, and the biggest challenge that they have is actually how do you identify the user that is an enterprise user who'd be interested in my technology? I don't know if you're at the stage of acquiring customers, if the product has been built, and how do you go to market in general? I mean, I know for print business it's a little bit different, but I'm curious to hear your perspective too.
Well, for us, it's been kind of an evolution. The first year or so, when we target banks and financial institutions primarily, and the first year or two was a lot of evangelizing. And you talked about blockchain, and the bankers would all get really nervous, like, oh no, we don't want to have anything to do with that dark crypto stuff. So then it was an education process. They realized that okay, there's more to it than just currency aspects of it. Then they became more open. Then they became, all right, let's do some testing, POCs. So now that's kind of evolved to the point where there's pilots and there's less educating on the benefits of it. And, okay, well, how can this benefit my business? How can this increase security? How can this help with user privacy? And then now it's to the point where it's still not there. I think we're still waiting for the hockey stick to kind of take off. We don't know if that's tomorrow or that's next year. So makes it a little bit of a challenge sometimes with fundraising and making sure you have enough runway. Dealing with banks, they take a while to make decisions as regulations, and so those are some of the challenges. It's heading that direction, but I don't think the critical mass is quite hit, and I don't know what the holdup is. If it's governance, if it's just waiting for your neighbor to do it. It's like, well, come back when you've got 20, 40 million users, and then we'll talk. Well, if I have 20 or 40 million users, I don't need to come back to talk to you. But
I'll just add to that. I think a lot about segmentation, and I think we need to think a lot more about how we talk about the enterprise and enterprise adoption, but there's so many different nuances to that. And if we think of an adoption curve that we often apply to consumers, and we think about it in the enterprise space, we really need to think carefully about what is characterizing those early adopters and what's their future going to be. So you've got these companies that are going, some are going all into blockchain. Some are, I was just looking yesterday at the number of patents MasterCard had registered of late. And so clearly there's companies that are just going all in, even though you don't know what their path is. And they're going to make a lot of mistakes, right? They're going to make mistakes, but they're going to learn. And then you've got these companies that are kind of blockchain curious and playing around in it, learning a little bit. And then you have those that think that this is, let's just let this thing we're going to inoculate ourselves against this. Like, we're not going to worry about it right now. Okay, well, I think this is a very pivotal moment because it is such a complex, difficult technology to learn how to use and to figure out all the different dynamics and multiple disciplines that get involved. So those that are learning now, those that are really getting dirty in it, even if they're making mistakes, could that be a pivot point for a day of reckoning in the future where it will completely stratify the enterprise space on those that started to think ahead about how this is really going to change, really got dirty in it, sure made mistakes along the way, maybe even had to rebuild a lot, versus those that just lost their ability to ever catch up? Is that...
One thing real quick. So we are heading that way, and so what we try to tell our customers is this is a crawl, walk, run process. You don't have to buy and implement the whole thing tomorrow. Just do one part of it, and then what we have is something that doesn't have to be ripped out and torn out and started again. You can, build on top of that and gain some learnings. If they're not, the market is heading that direction, and they're going to be left behind.
So I think we've taken a very interesting strategy in the space is that, first of all, we go to a lot of enterprise clients and we sit with them and they tell us, yeah, we sit with a lot of crypto companies and they're all trying to sell us their product, but it's not the right fit. And we sit with them and we say, well, we're here to ask you what are your pains, to understand your needs, and then we'll build the tools so you can build your solution on us. Which is a very different approach from what's happening in the crypto market. And our second business approach to user acquisition was see where the markets are. I think in the United States specifically, we have a tendency of only looking at the big players here in the Silicon Valley. Well, they're like 3 years behind Asia. We've taken our business initially to Korea. Korea is known for being the biggest secondary market, but that's the least of it. They're the biggest adopters of new technology. If you're talking about mobile payments or things that are light years ahead of us in terms of the mainstream user adoption, but that's also affecting their enterprises and their corporations. So you have the Korean Amazon, Temu, and the Korean WeChat and Messenger, Kakao. They've all been full in, beyond POCs, full in production, hiring hundreds of engineers working on their crypto projects for over between 2 and 1 year. So that's where we've taken our market, and now when the rest of the world is catching up, we actually have use cases from Asia that we can bring to them and we say, okay, they moved really fast, they broke a few things, but this worked and this is how much money they saved or this is how much they managed to add value.
And I think they're more willing to take risks. We do 2/3 of our business outside the U.S. because maybe they're trying to, in the Middle East, diversify from the oil and natural resources they have, where they're willing to take these bigger initiatives and gambles to leapfrog the technology to do that. Maybe in the U.S. here, there are more regulations or they're just risk averse. I'm not sure what it is, but I know the same feeling.
So I think there's another factor that you triggered a thought on for those companies, the enterprises that will be able to understand how to capture this value in the technology. And you mentioned customers that are getting what they want versus not getting what they need. But to understand what you need with this technology can be really hard, especially if your team is all technologists, right? So I think that those large organizations that can figure out how to bring a diverse set of functional skills and expertise to a point where they understand enough of the potential of the technology and they're able to work with a technologist to really identify use cases that are going to make impact in their business, not just 10 years from now, but in the next few years. Those are the ones that are really going to start pulling ahead. So when they can do that and then work with the tools that are available in the market to make that happen, that's a very interesting combination. That's super hard for a multinational, very distributed organization to do, where functional areas work in silos. This is going to be a backbreaking for the enterprise, and it's really going to set apart those that are able to work across these functional areas and across partner ecosystems as well, because that's where the magic happens, isn't it?
Talk about who your customers are, so it gives us a better idea of, as you said, enterprises all over the map. And is your customer IT? Is your customer functional?
So for our virtual guests, the question is, who are your customers? The customers of the panel speakers.
Well, I probably shouldn't say this, but I don't exactly know, because a lot of cases it's different. You have a person who is in compliance who might be the main champion. It could be IT. It could be the innovation person, a product person. Oh, for us it's banking and financial. So anything that in that category, primarily governments, airlines. So Middle East is a key area for us. U.S., Europe, and then to the lesser degree, probably Australia and Southeast Asia.
So we built an all-purpose blockchain. So anyone who needs infrastructure, it would be like asking AWS, like, what is your, who are your clients? But we're especially fitted for ones that are already at scale. So little dApps that are just starting out, they can still use Ethereum without too much pain if they don't have too many transactions. We're really built for the ones who are integrating blockchain into the back end of their existing technology, and they need to onboard 10 million users tomorrow onto a blockchain. Like, that's the kind of throughput that we're offering.
And how many customers do you, you can't say, like, are you talking 10, or are you talking 100 or 1,000? Like, how big a customer base do you have?
The question is, how many customers do you have? How big is your user base?
So we're launching the mainnet in a month and a half at the end of the quarter. So right now we're only working with design partners. We're not taking in partners until the mainnet is out. We're only working with ones that we can really sit with them, understand their needs, and then adjust our roadmap according to their needs. So that's why it's it's not a big number. But as soon as the mainnet is up, it's a public blockchain. Anyone can build on it.
And for us, our product has been in employment for 2 to 3 years. So it's currently being used, I would say, in 3 or 4 dozen customers in various sizes.
I'm consulting, so yeah.
So Bitcoin was introduced 10 years ago, and I'm curious, how fast do you think can this industry move? It seems like there's been some time and some lag, and I know the infrastructure needs to be built and stuff like that. But how fast is adoption happening really in this industry? Is it fast enough? Is there a strong need for blockchain?
Okay, so I'll share an opinion on this. It's really frustrating. It's been really frustrating to me to see all the frustration with how slow everything is moving. That is because there was such a hype cycle, right? So we had all these heightened expectations. It's very human, even if we could understand analytically why the cryptocurrency prices didn't necessarily imply blockchain rate of adoption right away. But we still had these crazy expectations. And so there's been a lot of impatience, and it drives me crazy because these are very complex ecosystems and multiple organizations that need to adopt. This is a very raw technology. There is so much human and financial capital that has moved into the space in the last couple of years. For goodness sakes, let's get some time to build this shit out. There's a lot of change management that needs to be brokered. There's a human side. People aren't communicating about what this is. It's a very technology to technologist to technologist discussion. I would like to see a lot more people really thinking about how we deal with the human factor, and there's so many layers to that, as well as talking about adoption and being more patient for this to evolve and develop. It's really only been a few years of this massive investment. Okay, I'll get off my soapbox.
I'll echo those sentiments, saying that with all disruptive technologies, there's an evolution, and it takes time to get through some of these things and get everyone to buy in, and just change the way they're used to doing business.
Yeah, it's moving way too fast. So we say we're inside the blockchain space. We always say everything's in dog years. So if something used to happen in like 1 year in the last tech cycle, and blockchain 7 years, it happens in 1 year. Like the cycles, the technology, the fact that you need to change your business strategy every few months because the entire market has changed and your clients changed and your market's changed, and the ones who didn't build a flexible enough solution are already not surviving, even though they raised then at hundreds of millions of dollars and were at the top of the hype last year because they're not flexible enough and it's moving too fast. So I wish it would have slowed down a little bit, but it's not going to. So you just have to deal with it. Yeah, cope.
I think it's fascinating that we still don't really understand how various consensus mechanisms are going to behave in the wild. We don't know what's going to happen. And so we need time. We're baking stuff in that's going to be hard to change. And yet we don't know what's going to happen when that's in a million people's hands, except for rare exception. We've seen that. So I too would like us to be very thoughtful about the what we're baking in, the ethics of what's being baked in, to really understand the behavioral economics of this, the social science of that.
So what kind of challenges do your clients come to you with? Like, what do you help them solve? I'm curious, Alison.
Yeah, so a lot of what I focus on is educating a market or a partner ecosystem on what the heck this is, why they should care. And a lot of the times it's not even talking about blockchain. It's talking about the features and functionality that blockchain enables primarily. And then also to inspire them, like that's a really important element. Behind every business decision maker, every buyer, there's a human being. And so they have busy lives. They need to be inspired. So that's what I've been focusing on because, yeah. You guys probably have an answer for that.
So I guess mine would be just finding out who that champion is and what their needs are and what they're trying to build. And yeah, so what we can do is we utilize the blockchain to enable a lot of those different things, but really understanding what they want to build, what are their objectives, initiatives that they have internally. So I think it's on a lot of case-by-case basis.
So we think we know what our clients want, and we're building it. For example, our clients said they want Ethereum token standard, ERC20 token. They want Ethereum is the standard for token launch. It is the largest liquidity network that exists out there. So we built our product with interoperability to Ethereum. Now, with the new wave of corporations and enterprises coming in to the blockchain space, a lot of them are talking about needing a more hybrid model between private and public. So if you look at the infrastructure space right now, it's very binary. It's either Ethereum, fully public, zero control, and all data available to everyone, or you have Hyperledger with some in other private blockchains that the other side of the spectrum is saying, oh, it's not really a blockchain. It's a glorified Excel sheet shared by a closed permissioned consortium, and there's nothing in between. So we've understood that most of the companies we're working with, most of our clients, they want something in between. So let's build something that will give them the spectrum. First of all, to be able to evolve and not be locked into one or the other, and also to have a hybrid model that can bring in better use cases for them because they can do a hybrid.
Awesome. I want to come back to the topic of user adoption and what's the main roadblock. So I have some ideas and hypotheses. One of them is Is there really a need for blockchain? Do all companies need blockchain or not? That's one. Two, education I think is a big component, so I'm glad there's more literature written and there's community like ours to help educate. Is there anything else that's missing that requires the adoption of infrastructure is probably another one. User experience could be another one, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this. What can make this the next internet?
Yeah, so I think it's very challenging there's not a lot of examples out there yet. So it's very challenging to figure out, to forge this new ground of how we're going to do this. And I see a lot of enterprises. So there's an interesting model that I saw emerge with a couple of the companies that I studied where they would have a multidisciplinary team identifying potential use cases. And one trick that I saw emerge in a couple places that I really liked was that the first challenge is let's find the potential use cases, and then let's challenge ourselves to find a non-blockchain solution. So when you ask, is blockchain really necessary? I think the first thing to say is, can we solve it any other way right now? And that helps the enterprise narrow down on where is it really necessary? Like, where is this actually adding value? And so
It's more expensive. It's like if you have instead of one AWS processor, you have at least 21, it's more expensive. So you only need to use it in the instance that it really makes sense for a trustless environment.
And at the same time, it's important that you learn because the cost will come down. And so if you've learned somewhere in the organization some of the basics and you've had some, you got some bruises on your knees and some cuts because it was hard. Like it was a hard thing to do, right? You'll be better at applying it to other areas. And look at all the different levers that are going to be pulled, all the innovation that is happening that's going to bring down the cost, right? The cost of compute is being reduced. Consensus mechanisms are getting better. Like thing after thing, piece after piece is being attacked. So it's going to come down. So you need to be ready. A lot of it is being ready.
It's also, you mentioned UX, UI. We're definitely in the ugly duckling stage of blockchain. Think about like trying to download a picture in the internet in 1997 or something like that. Like that's what it feels like. That's what it looks like. It's so ugly.
And another fun trick is to ask 10 of your neighbors what's a blockchain and just see, ask professionals, business professionals, and just see their faces. Like people don't understand what it is yet. It's scary. Fear. Here's another thing.
So to me, blockchain is like an infrastructure, right? Yet it became a marketing term, and a lot of companies raising finance and go to market with their products because they have the words blockchain somewhere written out on their website or mentioned on the team. Would you guys agree with that statement? What are your thoughts on this?
No, absolutely. I think when the IPO craze was happening last year, ICO, my bad. We were at conferences, and then people were, well, so how long have you been using the blockchain? It's like, well, from the beginning, we didn't think of it any other way. It wasn't that, oh, now we need to become a blockchain company because the hype. So I think there was a lot of people just kind of jumping on just because of that hype.
So when you guys, for example, for you, Ali, when you talk to your customers, and those are like financial institutions that have extremely long purchase cycles, right? Extremely slow to adopt a new technology. Do you mention blockchain as part of the features, or is that the first headline when you?
Yeah, I think more and more we're going against that because we're an identity company. If we can help, provide better security and better user experience and privacy, think of us more that way than having to sell twice. Because once you use that buzzword for blockchain, then it's like, oh, well, then that means I got to go through compliance and I have to justify it. It's like, so we try to get that out of the equation because it's just one more argument that we have to combat.
Awesome. So let's talk a little bit more about trends. And since we're moving at such fast pace, dog years, 1 year equals 7 years. Can we talk about the differences or like the change that happened since last year and what is awaiting for us next year? There's been a lot And some of this is unpleasant and, you know, a lot of turmoil, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts.
We really like crypto winter. First of all, a lot of the players that really shouldn't be in the space, like, no, I don't want your advisory service. Like, who are you? And just a lot of noise has been, you know, there's no more money, so the noise sort of like went out, and whoever is building is actually focused on building rather than trying to revive the hype all the time. So that's one aspect of crypto winter that's great. The other one is that the companies that manage their funds well are doing very well, and we're very happy and proud to be one of those companies. And in a very selfish way, to say that yes, a lot of our competitors have lost their pants because, not because they're not building great products, but because they're either, I don't know, of professors or like tech guys who don't know how to manage funds in the startup, especially not the type of money that came in. And all of a sudden, a year and a half after a $200 million raise, they're raising again, and we have a 7-year runway, which allows our R&D to build whatever we want. I mean, what startup has that fortunate opportunity to have a 7-year runway without always having to think about the next step? So for certain companies and us, we feel fortunate that this has happened, and we believe that it creates a really strong foundations for the future of blockchain, because the ones who are in the space right now are building.
I absolutely agree with that. I think that crypto, well, actually even more so the hype before crypto winter and what it attracted left us with some damage control problems that over time have to be, the general population needs more time to understand that this is real. And so I think that that's going to be a lot of the building that happens too over the next couple of years. But I'm grateful for it because it definitely created this more serious tone.
Anything to add?
I think you guys said it very eloquently. The crypto winter, getting rid of all the cheesy stuff that was like, fraudulent, and just having to clear my inbox of that. We looked at doing an ICO, and honestly, at the end of the day, it was more work than it was worth to have to manage the exchanges and do all that. It's like, that's not our business. We became like a whole different type of animal, and it was so great when we decided not to do it, and then the SEC coming down on everybody, so we didn't have to deal with that part. So I think it was kind of a nice thing to see.
So you guys are equity-based for you guys, and you raised capital with the ICO. Can you talk a little bit more about your fundraising and how you're thinking about future? I know you have some capital secured, but like, how are you guys been approaching it?
So we did a private token sale at the beginning of 2018 and converted it all to fiat because that's how paychecks are being paid right now until crypto reaches mass adoption.
Yeah, you guys did it early. So if you did it early, then you got in under the radar. But like by March, it was done.
And yours is equity-based, right?
Yes, we're equity-based.
Awesome. So what's coming up in the next 10 years for us in blockchain?
That's 70 years.
Well, I actually, we really believe in anything that has to do with identity as one of the strongest use cases for blockchain. We're seeing at the Department of Homeland Security actually put out a grant and tender for it. So it's both with managing current identities. I mean, think about the fact you have your birth certificate, and you have your passport, and you have your graduate diploma, and just having it all in one place that you control and you decide where to send what. That's amazing. But there's also the concept of fiat identity. Whether it's my credit score or an alternative credit score that a lot of the sharing of information about my financial activities and my digital identity can bring into the table, and that I can control as well. So identity is huge. And another thing we talked about before was data. So owning your data is
really the future. And with America's a bit behind on that as well, surprisingly. But with the GDPR and similar regulations in Asia, like in Japan, what it did in terms of policy, beyond the fact that you have to opt into cookie for them to track your activities, the real policy essence of the GDPR is the fact that it made data into an asset class. It is something that is monetizable. Like, there are companies out there monetizing on your personal data. Now with the regulation, it means, I look at it a little bit like Google and Facebook and Amazon being the robber barons of our time in terms of data in an era where there's a gap in regulation. And with blockchain technology and the ability to control where your data is at, then it's not necessarily, there's a bit of an extreme with the cyberpunks of, complete anonymity and having your data only in one place that no one else can see. But we look at it more, and there are really interesting business models that we're seeing. They're saying, well, we can, if it's an asset, then you can rent it out. And if a company is using your data to profit, then that's okay, as long as they pay you rent. And maybe there's going to be a market for it. So those are the really interesting trends that we're seeing.
And so my mind immediately went to identity, the importance of identity, but the data piece is so important. We were talking earlier that there was a document, a proposal put forth before the World Economic Forum in 2007, so before it all came out, from Sandy Pentland, who's one of the most recognized data scientists in the world. And he called for a new deal on data. And it talked about how we need data sovereignty is it is the cornerstone of being able to develop a sustainable digital future. You need that to be able to realize the true promise of big data, right? You need to be able to have the contributor own that data, feel safe giving that data, contributing that data, so work can be done on that data. At that time, there was no answer for it. So now we have a glimpse of the technology that could make this happen, right? But we need more than regulation. We need consumer pressure. And so we're starting to see consumer pressure. We're starting to see organizations like Facebook start to respond. But we're going to need more of that. And I have a question of how much people really care about privacy, understand privacy, and how much that's going to matter. So I don't know if this is going to come from regulators. I don't know if it's going to come from consumers. I don't know where it's going to come from, but that is my hope that it comes.
Okay. So I know that's a really holistic kind of view of it and aspirational, but for me, what excites me are the use cases that we can get out of maximizing our identity. We all have 30, 40, 50 different usernames and passwords. You call a call center, you got to answer all these intrusive questions about your mother's maiden name, your favorite color, make of your first car. So you've got all these different things you got to authenticate around, but I want to be able to do that on my own terms. I want to be able to go through an airport at walking speed. I want to not have to use a username and password. I don't want to, I want to definitively prove myself when I'm making a transaction, but I still want all that data to be safe, but I want it to improve my life. And I see that happening. It's just going to be a little bit of time.
Awesome.
I'm going to use this one. So I'm going to ask last question, and I want to open up to the floor. So please think of a question you want to ask our guests. What are your thoughts on the volume of blockchains that we need to sustain this industry? Will there be a consolidation? Do we need 1, 2, 3, 4? Like, even if you think about infrastructure and the cloud solutions that are out there, there's only a few that survived, and it's really a monopolistic world. What about blockchains? I think this question is for Danny more than anyone.
So we predict that there are going to be around 5 to 10 blockchains that will survive. That some of them will be all-purpose and some of them would be specific to industries, but that will work together in interoperability. And that's the most important part, the interoperability of working with, because you can't really justify 10 all-purpose blockchains. But if you have one blockchain that's very specific to the IoT industry and was built for use cases like automated cars talking to each other, then probably the same a different blockchain that was built for consumer applications and micropayments might not be suitable for it. But as long as they can talk to each other, we can have a back end of a blockchains, whether it's stack or more like a universe that works together that can communicate and make it very efficient.
Just to add to Danny's, I would say that, yeah, the interoperability is the key part. For us, we're blockchain agnostic. So when we first started the company, we started writing to the Bitcoin blockchain. Transaction speeds were about 10 minutes and 3 cents a transaction. That went through the roof. So what we created is an abstraction layer, an API that allows us to write to multiple blockchains. And so I think just having the choices and the flexibility and interoperability is the key point. I don't know how many. But I think that's probably the approach we think.
Thank you, guys. Do we have any questions from the audience? We have only 10 to 15 minutes left. Don't be shy. We need the microphone.
I can just ask without microphone.
I think the audience,
okay.
Virtual audience, needs the microphone.
Virtual audience. Oh, okay. Yeah. For Danny, so you're now looking for new partnerships, right? So what's the ideal type of partnership, or what's the ideal type of company you all want to work with?
So we raised our funds to build a technology, and that's why we don't want to develop a lot of. We see a lot of companies developing also a profitable. As sort of like their own system integrator or consultancy service. We're trying to avoid that. So we're right now on a blitz of talking to every SI we can find. One, because each one of them has 10 clients, 20 clients. So it's not us chasing individual clients, and they understand their clients' needs more than anyone, and they need a technology. So for us, the ideal partner right now is more of a B2B2B, the system integrator. Of course, the big and impressive blockchain dApps that have been in the space for a long time and are looking for a scalability solution. That's also ideal. That's also ideal for us. So that's what we're actively chasing. To be honest, we don't know what's going to be in 6 months, because last year we thought that CryptoKitties and Ethereum dApps would be the ones that would build on Orbs, and they hardly exist, and they haven't scaled to a point that they need Orbs yet. So that's open. We're just trying to build it as flexible as possible to accommodate as many needs. Strategic partnerships for us specifically also have to do with the Ethereum community. So whether it's the Ethereum Foundation that does research, because a lot of our research is based also on Ethereum, or Consensus, of course, which is the ecosystem and business arm of Ethereum. But also the big system integrators, consultants like IBM. So we've been pushing an IBM partnership, because we really believe that a lot of their clients that are building on private blockchain, when those projects scale, they will need a public blockchain, or at least a hybrid, like Alison said. And we want to be that solution that can work with the Hyperledger stack to give that solution, rather than try to compete with it.
So we're talking about enterprise applications, and historically, there come waves where there are certain types of applications that come out, and many companies are building kind of the same application. Leading up to Y2K, there was a lot of data consolidation and scanning and digitizing paper and things like that. There's certainly areas around security and identity. Do you see over the next, let's say, 5 years, 7 years, a focus on a particular type of application that uses the blockchain? Or are we going to see a greater degree of heterogeneity in the types of blockchain applications that enterprise start to build out?
So I think there's yes and yes, and here's why. So there's a couple core, we've talked about identity, for example, right? And so it's kind of something everyone has to solve. And so I think there'll be a lot of focus on that. In addition to that, you've got pretty much every single industry looking at different ways to solve their problems with this. So we're going to see both. And the other thing that happens a lot, that I see a lot, is that there's so much happening so fast that different players that are working on the same thing are not as aware of each other and what those players are doing than you think they would be. So I've often come in, especially to smaller teams, and been able to quickly identify new competitors for them that you think they know about, but they've been busy building a solution. And the other factor that complicates this is that this is very much distributed, I think as you've been hearing from us, beyond a Silicon Valley hub. So it's all over the world. So this is hyper innovation. And so it's also, yeah, it's going to be messy.
And I would say to add to that is that there has to be the interoperability part of it, because especially within identity, you have 7 billion people in the world. There's not going to be one identity provider, but the one that's going to be interoperable, work with the other ones, are probably going to be ones that are going to survive and thrive.
I think there's going to be consolidation I don't know of companies, but of specific industries that are using blockchain, like the purpose for which you use blockchain. So we're already seeing this right now, whereas if last year every use case that one could think about in the shower was out there, and now you have very specific ones that are prevailing. Supply chain management, identity, micropayments. So you can't do micropayments on with current fiat solutions like credit cards, because they charge the dealer 25 cents at least, so you can't do a 25 cents transaction. So micropayments, and also the ones getting disrupted the earliest, the industries are the ones that really asking for it. So either they're absolute pigs, like the remittances industry. So remittances is already being completely destroyed, hopefully in the next few years, as soon as possible. But the blockchain industry, because if you have people from India and Philippines working in the United States sending money home, it takes 10 days, and they take 20% of their paycheck in order to do it. And with even Bitcoin, and they're like going to be easier solutions now, they can do it in 10 minutes with like $1. Transaction fee. So the ones that are especially piggish, and maybe I will add ones that they're so archaic, but there is but it should be a very new industry. So one example that I really like is Open Music, which is a project by Berkeley College of Music with MIT that is bringing the music industry together, anywhere from the artists to the record labels, et cetera, and the whole supply chain management of it, of managing the royalties of the musicians. So this is something they try to explain to me how it works today. Archaic is not, I mean, it makes the banks look like they're futuristic. So those kind of use cases are really asking for it.
So I come from an enterprise background. So it's interesting working with system integrators, because in the end, the partner needs to sell a lot of business in order to make his number. And so I'm interested, when you're working with system integrators, are you finding that like Accenture, the large, are open to a smaller, more, startup world? Or are you finding that the boutiques is really where you're partnering?
it's easier to get to the boutiques first. And once you show traction, then go to the big ones. The big ones, though, it's a different strategy because they most of them have their own solution. They're supporting one solution, and if you can complement that solution and give it an edge, as opposed to just have another offering of a blockchain, and that's what I talked about, the interoperability, for example, with a Hyperledger or private blockchain, because you're allowing them to give more value to their client.
Any more questions from the audience?
So we started talking before about governance, but then we went up here, and I really wanted to hear the end of I think everyone should hear your approach on governance, and I think it's something that's not discussed enough in this space, how important chain governance is.
Yeah, I mean, as I was saying earlier, there's a lot of human pieces that we need to be more careful about. And so we've got a lot of learning to do, and I don't think there's a lot of good forums for sharing that learning, right? We're all kind of driving while the car's on fire a little bit. And so I'm curious what needs to emerge to really help us move forward in governance and collaborate on our best practices in that. I don't know what the answer is to that. Do you?
We're a small company, so I can't, and I'm up to my ass in alligators. I can't remember to drain the swamp. So it's like I don't have the resources to go change the governance or get the consensus behind that. So I need some of the bigger players to do that. Or if I could participate, then I'd be more willing to do that. But I can't shoulder that on my own.
Yeah, there's a lot of ethics, I think, in this that we're going to have to learn. And when data science first became a thing, we had to talk a lot about the ethics of the data science, and we still do. What kind of ethics are in the algorithms? Who's building it? What's in it? And so, with governance, that's going to be a big thing. And we don't know how to judge that yet. We don't know how to evaluate it or analyze it. And so how does your customer know? Like, it's just, this is new territory. New territory. I hope there's a lot of attention to this question. Thanks for asking that.
And I wanted to add, because you mentioned how are we even going to start discussing it, I think the most of the thought leaders in the space currently discussing governance are tech guys, and the governance right now, a lot of it is technocracy, and I think we need to bring in more lawyers, economists, and political scientists, because we're trying to create to code solutions to how to solve problems together or how to vote on something that are processes that evolved through history and hundreds of years, and there's a lot to learn from that evolution, and that we're just not taking outside data and outside expertise because it's not really science.
How do you code for the potential of human behavior? How do you do that? And I think it's probably going to be what you were saying earlier with flexibility, like all these principles. We kept saying those words. They're important.
I think it's more important to code for checks and balances. So you can't predict it, right? But you need to put a check on whatever would happen. And but I only know those terms and those concepts because my background is political science. But people are not, the ones who are talking about governance are not thinking about it because they're thinking about, how do I make sure the upgrade is done right when the right players are.
And this is why. So one of my other big things I get on a soapbox is skill diversity in the space, which leads to education. We need more skill diversity in the space. If this is ever going to go down, we need more people, diverse disciplines, coming into the space, asking questions.
To that point, I would just say, who currently is doing the work of governance in whatever industry you're looking to help change? I work in compliance, and we previously had to take all of these rules and turn them into ways to govern the behavior of people. So we've already been doing some of those things. I think reaching out to the compliance profession is another really important step.
Okay, one last question.
Last question. So obviously everyone is here for the technology. None of us care about the price. But if there was a gun to your head and you had to put all of your net worth into 3 coins, what would they be?
That's easy, not a financial advice. Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Orbs, obviously.
I will decline to answer that one.
I'm a very conservative investor. I invest with my time.
Great.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much for taking the time tonight. Thank you to the amazing audience as well for your epic questions. Please help yourself with pizza. Our guests will stick around maybe for 1 minute or 2 minutes. Ask them questions if you have any.
Yeah. Oh, it works there in the city? Nice. Yeah, we use them at the company, and I love single sign-on. It's the best thing.